Okay, here we go.
Okay. Oh, what the heck
What?
is that?
It's totally it. This is the rhododendron thing that woman was talking about. Okay, this is so beautiful.
You're listening to Go, the travel podcast. Pasaporte, por favor. Hi, my name is Alex Walensky.
And I'm Laura Clivens.
At the start of the show, you just heard Laura and I in Golden Gate Park, San Francisco.
Yes, we were on a quest for stones.
But not just any stones, the sacred stones. In fact, I'd say they're the lost stones of San Francisco.
Really?
Well, maybe the lost stones of Spain. But before we get too deep into the secret about these stones, our story begins at the Abbey of the New Clairvoux, a monastery in Vienna, California.
Causing trouble? Are you feeling better, Jess? My name is Susie Zimmer, and I'm the Director of Operations. So this is 600 acres. This 600-acre ranch, 13 of it is winery, and people will come out thinking that that's all this is. And no, this is a monastic community of men.
Wait a sec. A monastic community, like a monastery.
Yeah, but see, this is not like your average monastery.
So this is a Cistercian Trappist monastery, so they're strict observance, so they were the silent monks. So until about the mid-1960s, when they decided to lift the discipline of silence so that they would be able to better communicate with the outside world their beliefs.
Cistercian monks can be traced back to France in the year 1098. Now, these monks are legit. I mean, they've taken vows of poverty and labor. Something I don't think I could ever do. In fact, every day, Laura, I'm trying to get as far away from poverty with as little labor as possible. Anyway, I'll let Susie describe more.
Part of their creeds are right there. Hospitality, manual labor, prayer, simplicity, and solitude. Those are the 5 pillars of monastic life.
They've also been making wine for over 900 years.
They're well known for actually wine and ale. The Ovila Abbey Ale is a partnership between Sierra Nevada and the monks.
Okay, wait a second. So I like wine. Wine made by monks sounds amazing. But what does this have to do with the stones?
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked, because the Cistercian monks and these sacred stones have a really long history together. But we're going to have to go back to the 12th century to a monastery in Spain called the Santa Maria de Ovila.
In about 1190, they started building Santa Maria de Ovila. So they were building on it for, about the next 100 years or so.
So this monastery was built in the Spanish countryside about 90 miles northeast of Madrid. Over the next few centuries, several more buildings were added. One of the first and most beautiful buildings of the monastery was the chapter house. This chapter house was built in like the Gothic style, so if you can imagine a building with these beautiful pointed arches and ribbed vaulted ceilings.
Wow. So what is a chapter house?
Here, I'll let Susie describe it.
A chapter house is one of the rooms in the abbey where the monks meet daily to discuss a chapter of Saint Benedict's rule for living. Saint Benedict, the founder of the Cistercian Trappist movement.
You see, it's a very important building. These are typically built with the best materials, meaning the best stone available. So for over 600 years, the monks kind of thrived here, until about the 1830s when only about 4 monks remained. So the Spanish government confiscated the monastery and sold it to private interest, where it was then being used as kind of like a barn.
A barn? So you're telling me this beautiful building had animals using it and pooping in it and things like that?
Yeah, but only for about 100 years, though.
100 years is a long time. Okay, so fast forward to what, 1930s?
Yeah, well, 1931 to be exact. So
Okay.
there was this guy. His name was William Randolph Hearst. You may have heard about him.
Heard of him, totally. He built a publishing empire, and he's really well known in the journalism world.
Right, and he was also a huge art collector, but he liked buildings too, old Gothic ones, and he wanted one of his own. Hearst decided that he had to have the chapter house of this monastery, and he bought it for about $97,000, which today, if you adjusted for inflation, would be about $1.5 million. But then he had to have it torn down, crated, and shipped.
Wow.
Here's Susie again.
So he literally laid tracks to get the stones down to the water, and they filled 11 ships.
11 steam engine ships made their way across the Atlantic, through the Panama Canal, and up into the San Francisco Bay.
11 ships sounds crazy. That dude is super extravagant. How much did it cost?
For Hearst, it costs about $1 million. But if you adjust it for inflation today, it costs about $15.5 million
Wow.
for
That's
one building.
insane.
Yeah.
You know, the Depression kind of rolls in and money gets tight. And so by the time the stones arrive and he's got all these grandiose plans, his accountants go, sorry, you know, this is not happening. You're going to have to do something different. So pretty soon he starts to rack up storage fees.
About $1,000 a month, which is like $15,000 a month in today's dollars.
Whoa.
And to think, Hearst originally wanted to build a pool inside of this chapter house after it was done being reconstructed.
Whoa. $15,000 a month to store stones for an unbuilt pool house. Not worth it.
Well, that's the same thing Hearst thought. And so he kind of got rid of the stones.
What do you mean he just got rid of them? Weren't they just sitting like in this pier in these boxes?
Well, Hearst strikes a deal with the city.
You know, he kind of gifts the stones to the city. They forget about the debt that he owes.
And the city had planned to eventually rebuild the monastery in honor of Hearst.
You know, the Hearst Memorial Museum that will go in Golden Gate Park. But there's no money attached with the plans.
So they moved the stones to Golden Gate Park, still in these wooden crates, waiting for something to happen.
While the stones are being stored, someone lights the stones on fire because they were crated in the beginning. And it's not just once, 5 fires were lit. So they went from being crated and marked to where you could use them again to being in big jumbly piles.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So imagine having like a piece of IKEA furniture with over 1,000 pieces and no instructions and no customer service.
Crates were gone, the packaging was all gone, so all that was left was a pile of stones.
That sucks. So how are they going to know how to put the chapter house back together now?
Well, see, it would take a miracle or a lot of money and time. But the city of San Francisco wasn't really in the mood to spend millions of dollars to put this 12th century Gothic building back together.
So what happened?
So the stones just kind of sat in a pile in Golden Gate Park, looking like a pile of rubble or something.
Oh.
And they sat and they sat and they sat. And over the years, you know, park workers would use them for parking lot barricades. You know, I know that they line one of the ponds. You know, I know that there are some in the Japanese tea gardens that are still there. And so the stones were kind of being used all over the place, but not used for what they were originally intended.
Alex, you know we are a half hour away from Golden Gate Park.
I do know that, but I've never actually been there.
I cannot believe that you have been living in Berkeley for several years and do not go to Golden Gate Park. It's amazing. We have to go.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
So Laura and I go across the Bay Bridge into San Francisco, up into Golden Gate Park in search of these stones. We find a parking spot and start searching for these ancient relics.
It looks like it's in the botanical garden. Yes. In the botanical garden. Did you know that?
I had no idea.
Looks like that's it. Let's go walk by the fence and see if we can see anything.
Okay.
This way.
Let's do it.
Okay.
So just outside the entrance to the botanical garden at Golden Gate Park, we found our first stones. But we're not sure if these are the ones we're looking for.
Huh.
I mean, they look old.
Whoa. This looks cool, actually. They look at first they look like not much, like just sort of jagged, but actually they're carved, like the tops.
When you look closely, these look like they belong on top of a building, not on the ground.
What do you think? It's like 2 feet by a foot?
2 feet long by 1 foot long, and it's super unassuming. It looks like just a regular stone.
That's so funny. It's just here, like before we even entered the park, and there's all this landscaping of pretty shrubs around it and stuff, and then a few trees, and then there's bamboo right over here to the right. Whoa, look.
Oh, these got to be it. These have to be it.
Whoa, yes, this has to. This looks like a column. These are higher. They're like straight up, not circular.
Laura and I know that there are more stones inside of the botanical garden, so we headed inside to see if we can find some more.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. We're looking for the stones. We're on a quest for stones, for the 12th century stones. Do you know where they are?
Hey, Melissa, you know about the 12th century stones?
Okay, can you give your last name as well?
Sure, Melissa Clairvoux. They just sat on the dock in San Francisco and just languished for a long time. And then they came to us, and we built all of these walls all over the garden.
Wow.
I actually worked in the library when they were building this at the end of the construction. I say construction, which is kind of amusing because there was one guy who was out there with a little hammer. And I would sit in the library and I would hear this tick, 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 tick.
As he was reconstructing the wall. Like, was that what you think he was doing? Reconstructing?
Oh, that's absolutely what he was doing. He was building these fences with the stones.
So we go to find some more intricate stones and see if any of the visitors in the garden knew about the stones. And we found this guy on a bench. He's sitting there. It's made out of the stones. His name is Lucas, and I fill him in on the history of the stones and see what he thinks.
What are your thoughts now about where you were just sitting?
That sounds like the most beautiful tragedy I've ever witnessed for $1 million.
Right, and that's not adjusted for now.
$1 million, a lot of effort, a lot of money for something from Spain that used to be bigger and beautifuler in a smaller context, someplace where somebody doesn't know or care. That sounds sad.
You know, the way he put it, it is kind of sad.
Yeah.
But I've got some good news.
Really?
Yeah, so not all hope is lost.
Yes.
So this part of the story, we're going to go back to the new Clairvoux monastery in Vina to talk with Susie again, who's going to tell us about this guy named Father Thomas Davis.
So when Father Thomas came in 1955, which is the year we were founded here, he had one day off between coming from Kentucky and coming up to Vina. He took a tour of Golden Gate Park. And when the tour guide said, "Oh yeah, and those are Cistercian stones from a monastery in Spain," that started his quest.
What was his quest?
So from 1955 until 1994, he was requesting and petitioning and writing letters and then calling and then emailing, just like, you're not doing anything with the stones. Let them rest on the soil here.
And they got them. The city agreed to give the remaining stones to the monks.
That's awesome.
We got a big bunch of charred stones and stones that have been aged and out in the elements for about 70 years. Well, one of the reasons the monks got the stones is because people were like, this is never going to go back together. It's a fool's errand with no blueprints and no plans and nobody with the expertise. It's just not going to happen. They decided that the chapter house was mostly there, more than 60%, so they decided that they were going to pursue putting that back together.
That is amazing. I want to go there. I want to try some wine and hang out with the monks and do some hymnaling and things like that. She sounds awesome too.
The Abbey of New Clairvoux completed the first phase of construction in May 2016. They still have a long way to go to complete the entire project, but the chapter house portion is open and available for public viewing. The new Clairvoux is surrounded by vineyards and also has a wine tasting room that you can visit yourself. If you're interested in finding out more info about the monastery and the stones, we have pictures and links on our website at gothepodcast.com. Leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're getting your podcasts and let us know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media. We'd like to thank the Abbey of New Clairvoux, Golden Gate Park, Melissa Clairvoux, and you, our listeners. This podcast was produced by me, Alex Swolinsky.
And me, Laura Clavins. Thanks for listening.